Communicating is not like driving on a quiet, familiar one-way street, guaranteed that if you keep the steering wheel straight, you'll get exactly where you want to be, achieving your intended impact. In the real world, communicating is more like navigating an unfamiliar, zigzagging back road with surprising bumps and detours, and someone else often steers. Under these conditions, it's much harder to get where you want to go, achieving the impact you intend. When we interact with others, whether interpersonal communication or formal presentations, intent is what we hope they'll think, feel, and do. Impact is what they actually think, feel, and do. Here's a challenge. We tend to judge ourselves by our intent, but others judge us by our impact. So for strong communication in any situation, with any counterpart or audience, we have to remember that intent isn't impact. And between our intent and their impact are dozens of off-roads, misinterpretations, misunderstandings, and mistaken assumptions. Everyone has various biases, preconceptions, potential distractions, and competing agendas that can get in the way. We all know this from experience. We've all been misunderstood in the past. You've had that happen, right? It's not fair. Sometimes, even with the best of intentions, our impact is the exact opposite of our intent. One executive I coached, when people disagreed with him, he would scowl at them with an angry look on his face. Soon, his new team stopped offering ideas, and he couldn't understand what was wrong. He loved being challenged. The scowl was simply how he looks when he concentrates. He wasn't mad, he was listening. Another executive I worked with stood up abruptly in the middle of a team meeting and shouted, "Are you telling me that this has been going on for 2 months and I didn't even know about it?" His team was insulted and intimidated, but his intent was to express disappointment with himself. He was taking the blame, not giving it. In the hundreds of executive coaching engagements I've had over the years, so many of them with truly amazing, talented leaders, some version of the intent-impact gap comes up every single time. It happens even to the best people with the best intentions. Research in this area extends what we know from experience. Not only does the intent-impact gap exist, but we tend to vastly underestimate how big the gap can be. Elizabeth Newton conducted famous experiments in which people were randomly divided into 2 roles, tappers and listeners. The tappers chose from a list of songs well known to the people in the experiment, such as Happy Birthday to You and Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Then they tapped the rhythms of their songs on a table, and their listeners were asked to guess the song. Tappers predicted listeners would get the song right 50% of the time. The actual result? 2.5%. They almost never got it right. Instead of 1 out of 2 correct guesses, it turned out to be 1 out of 40. That's the intent-impact gap in action. Why did it happen? Because the tappers always hear the song in their head while they're tapping. You can try it yourself. You can't unhear the tune in your mind while you're tapping. But listeners hear no tune while the tappers are tapping, just a strange pattern of sounds. The tapper's intent was to communicate a song. The listener's impact was random noise. There are important real-world implications here. We can't unthink all the work and preparation, thinking, and personal history that go into our intent. And our listeners can't magically get up to speed on all of that, even if they wanted to. One more point about the tapper-listener experiment. The tappers tend to be frustrated with the listeners. It's so easy, what's wrong with them? But there was nothing wrong with them. The listeners were simply experiencing their impact. This points to a critical danger when others don't understand us. We're tempted to think that their impact is their fault. But in real-world situations, blaming our listeners is never a good option. It can sabotage results and quickly cause lasting damage to our relationships and reputation. So we need to remember that when we communicate, we're always tapping, and our intent is the song in our heads that our listeners don't hear. When we don't have the impact we want, don't ask, "What's wrong with them?" Ask, "What can I do instead?" And what can you do to gain the strong, clear, positive impact you want in your communication? Those are the steps we cover in this course. It begins, crucially, here, being aware of the intent-impact gap. When we're aware of it, we can take positive steps to proactively bridge it before, during, and after our communication. There's work to be done, but it's the best kind of work, and the results are more than worth it. The communication road that connects intent to impact has curves and rough patches, but at least it's not boring. It's definitely the scenic route, the best one to take. Let's take it. Take some advice from your successful future self. Imagine that your next important conversation, meeting, or presentation goes exceptionally well. If people were interviewed immediately afterward, what are the answers you'd most like to hear to these 3 questions? What will they say that they learned? What will they say was their dominant impression of you? And what will they do because of what you said? These questions point to the three elements of a strong purpose. Before any important discussion, meeting, or presentation, answer three questions. 1, what do you want your listeners to think? 2, what do you want them to feel? And 3, what do you want them to do? Think, feel, do. Thoughts, feelings, actions. Clarify the impact you want to have in all three areas, and you'll have a much stronger, actionable, forward-thinking purpose. Having this fuller, more proactive purpose will help you sharpen both your message and your delivery, how you present your ideas, and how you present yourself. Both are crucial. A strong purpose will also help you stay on track under pressure or when jarred by unexpected distractions. To create your proactive purpose, here's what you do. Take out a paper or open a document to make notes. At the top, specify what kind of conversation, meeting, or presentation it is, and who will be there. Then go through your think, feel, do questions and generate a list of answers to each question. 1. What do you want them to think? This is about what you want your listeners to learn or be aware of by the time they walk away. What's most important? Do you want them to be informed about something? Updated, persuaded, convinced, instructed? Decide what's most important for you to add to their existing perspective. Second question, what do you want them to feel? This is about the kind of impression, attitude, or emotion you want them to have about you and your message. For example, if someone asks them right after the interaction, what's the number one impression they have about you, what would you want them to say? Maybe you want them to feel confident about your ability to lead, or stand out as a top candidate for promotion. Maybe you want them to have noticed a particular personal quality you demonstrated, such as poise under pressure, or creativity, or perseverance, or something else. Or maybe it's important for them to feel especially moved or motivated by your message. Whatever it is, you decide and write it down. Third question, what do you want them to do? This is about taking action. Do you want your listeners to do something about your request, recommendations, or action items? The key here is to be very specific about 1, what do you want them to do? 2, with whom? And 3, by when. What, with whom, and by when. Next, choose your top purpose priorities. When you answer the think, feel, do questions, you're likely to generate more than one response to each question, and that's fine. But to ensure you focus on what matters most in the limited time you have, be sure to choose your number one response for each question. What's the most important thing you want to add to their thinking? What's the most important thing you want them to feel? And what's the most important thing you want them to do? Going forward, we'll use those 3 priorities directly to increase the positive impact of what you say and how you say it. Follow these steps and sharpen your 3-part purpose proactively. You'll not only be taking good advice from your successful future self, you'll do your listeners and your future self the favor of making it easier to achieve what you really want to accomplish. When it comes to what you really want to accomplish in your communication, some things are for you to know and for others not to find out. Let's distinguish between your private purpose and your public objective. It's important to have both, and it's crucial to know the difference. Your private purpose prioritizes the impact you really want to have with your listeners. As we covered in the previous segment, you clarify your private purpose with your personal answers to the think, feel, do questions. You don't necessarily share any of those answers with your listeners. It's part of your preparation and planning. It's like getting ready for the big game. Some of it is personal for you and would be distracting for them. But you do need to let your listeners know why meeting with you will be worth their time. This is the public objective you'll share openly with them, so they don't get confused, frustrated, or distracted about why they're meeting with you. For example, before a presentation in front of your manager and her peers, you might share your public objective of bringing them up to date on the status of an important project. That's worth their time, but your private purpose might include other elements. For example, take the feel question. How do you want your manager and her peers to feel after your presentation? If your top priority is change the impression that I'm nervous around senior management and inspire in them a feeling of confidence that I'm ready for promotion, then in most cases, you won't declare that to the group out loud or in an email. One of the things I most want to accomplish today is not look nervous. No. But if that's an important part of your private purpose, you do want to construct and deliver your message to help create that impression. Your public objective will typically fall under one of these 3 categories. To persuade your listeners, for example, ask them to approve a request or recommendation. To inform your listeners, For instance, update them on a project status or instruct them on a procedure. Or to invite your listeners, for example, to provide input, perspectives, or advice. You might have several objectives, but it's crucial to prioritize. The real world often disrupts our best intended plans, so simpler is better. Also, you don't want to set yourself up to fail to achieve what turned out to be too many priorities. Give yourself the best chance of accomplishing what matters most. Decide which objective is number one and emphasize that. Sharpen it until you're able to express your number one public objective clearly, concisely, and consistently. You'll come across as more prepared, decisive, and respectful of your listeners' time. So, although parts of your private purpose are for you to know and them not to find out, it's always good for them to find out you're prepared, decisive, and you respect their time. Steve Jobs said, you have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple. But it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains. 3 key words in the middle of that quote: make it simple. Point to the first of 4 guidelines to design your message for maximum impact. First, make it simple. Jobs is a great role model for the power of simplicity. Countless examples. Before Apple introduced the iPod, people got confused about so-called MP3 players. Jobs said, it's 1,000 songs in your pocket, and everyone instantly understood. In his legendary 2005 commencement address at Stanford University, he distilled his abundant life experience into 3 stories and 4 words. Stay hungry, stay foolish. That's making complex simple. That's what we want to do too. So when preparing your message, remember, complex confuses, but simple sticks. No matter how complex your underlying analysis and reasoning, make your message simple. If your listeners get lost, you lose. The iPod was more complex than any other MP3 player on the market, but the message was simpler and it sold. Make it simple applies especially to your public objective. Don't hide your public objective for a dramatic reveal later on. As journalists say, don't bury the lead. For instance, if life were discovered on Mars today, tonight on the news, what they wouldn't do is introduce the story with talk about telescopes and the lonely lives of scientists. Then 10 minutes later, oh, also, the red planet has little green men. No. The story would start with the most important point. There's life on Mars. Put what matters most up front and be able to state your public objective in one clean, clear, simple sentence. Is your objective to inform? Get right to the point. I want to share important results from our analysis that you need to know. Is it to persuade? Get to the point. We recommend you go forward with this project. For your next meeting, what's the headline for your public objective? What's your life on Mars? Second guideline, provide a roadmap. Preview the main points that drive your objective in one clear sentence. You know where you're going, but they don't unless you tell them. Don't make them guess. They might guess wrong. Don't let them get lost, confused, or frustrated trying to figure it out. Tell them where you're going. In the first example about sharing analysis results, you can say next, we'll focus on the 2 most relevant areas, schedule implications and effects on quality. And here's a roadmap for the second example about seeking project approval. In our presentation, we'll share 3 areas of analysis that drive a recommendation and then welcome any feedback or questions. Provide a roadmap. Now there's an old saying that captures the third guideline. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. At first it sounds funny, but then when you break it down, it makes sense. It's a great guideline to help you avoid complexitis or getting pulled off course by other distractions. Now sure, sometimes you'll need to adapt to your situation, but remember your public objective and remember your purpose. What do you want your listeners to think, feel, and do? If you need to adapt toward your think, feel, do priorities, not away from them. Don't let stress or diversions make you forget what you most want to achieve. Plan for tough questions, plan for interruptions, anticipate challenges, and practice ways to respond to keep the main thing the main thing. Fourth guideline, start strong, finish strong. Studies show that people tend to remember information presented at the beginning and the end more than the rest. Beginnings and endings matter disproportionately. Let's treat them that way and gain the extra impact that comes with first and last impressions. If small talk first is customary in your situation, that's fine. But don't ramble, mumble, or wander mentally too far from your purpose. And when it is time to start strong. Get to the point and make it simple and memorable. And when it's time to end, be clear, concise, and reinforce the impression you want them to remember. Don't be ambiguous or trail off indecisively as you finish. In gymnastics, they deduct points if the athlete stumbles around at the end. Same thing goes in business communication. Stick the landing. Speak loud and clear until the end, and when you're done, be done. So for your next meeting or presentation, work with a trusted friend or colleague, and sharpen how you'll apply each of the 4 guidelines. 1, make it simple. Clarify your core message. Make it crisp and concise. 2, provide a roadmap. Give your listeners a brief preview of where you're going. 3, keep the main thing the main thing. Anticipate likely challenges and prepare how to respond. And 4, start strong, finish strong. Practice how you'll begin and end to make your first and last impressions engaging and confident. That's how you do it. That's how to design the content of your message for maximum impact. As Steve Jobs also said, design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. Use the 4 guidelines to structure your content and make your message work. A big, burly, 6'6" corporate vice president in a meeting grabbed his shorter boss by his sport coat lapels, smiled, then kissed him right on top of his bald head. I'm not kidding, I'm not making this up, and I'm not even stretching the truth. He kissed him right on top of his bald head, right there. I'll tell more of the story, but that's already enough to remember 5 ways to make your message more memorable. Grab their mental lapels, paint a picture, tell a story that sticks, put emotion in motion, and kiss your listeners. Number 1, grab their mental lapels. In our opening, the big VP literally grabbed his boss's lapels. You'll do it figuratively. Seize their attention positively. Motivate them to not multitask by starting with an attention-getting question, fact, statistic, or an analogy, quotation, anecdote, or a surprising statement that supports your positive purpose. 2, paint a picture. Specifics are much more vivid than concepts. It's the difference between someone saying, "Look, sea life," when you're swimming in the ocean versus, "Look, a great white shark." Images compress massive information and persist in the mind. Think of a favorite snapshot of you with friends. An entire block of thought and emotion is immediately available. Paint pictures in your communication. Recreate specific details from your experience that advance your purpose. In your mind's eye, see it vividly, like a scene from a movie. Then provide enough concrete detail to recreate that scene in the minds of your listeners. That's the test of whether you've done it or not. Is it recreated vividly enough for people who weren't part of the original experience to see it? In the boss kissing example, there were several details. The VP's 6'6" height, grabbing the sport coat lapels, and smooching the boss on his bald head. You can also add detail by describing sounds or dialogue. Number 3, tell a story that sticks. Storytelling is deeply rooted in history across cultures. We're programmed to hook into stories. We're affected by them, remember them, and retell them. Stories stick. For business communication stories that stick, try the PST story, which stands for Problem, Solution, Takeaway. Start with the problem, a difficult challenge you or your team faced. Next, bring your listeners toward the solution, how you dealt with or overcame the challenge. Finally, reinforce the reason you're telling this particular story at this time for this audience by stating the takeaway you want them to remember. To illustrate, here's more from our example with the big VP. He addressed the problem, P, of how to make a boring strategic planning session more engaging. His solution? The S. For his presentation on growth in Europe, he drew on his own lineage and dressed up as a German Fräulein, wig, dress, and all, and made things upbeat and fun. He achieved his takeaway, T, energizing the team about the topic. Don't follow his example literally. My takeaway for you is to use the steps appropriate to your situation, not to kiss your boss. 4, put emotion in motion. To stay in people's minds, engage their hearts. We remember associations with strong feelings. Think of your favorite songs from growing up, for example. You can put emotion in motion by choosing an important part of your message you want your listeners to remember and the feeling you want them to associate with it. Maybe you want them to feel inspired or motivated, maybe determined or appreciated, encouraged, or something else. Next, use the techniques that we just covered, which are ideal vehicles for inspiring emotion. Paint a picture or tell a story that includes the emotion you want them to feel. Telling the boss kissing story, I hoped you felt some happiness because I think learning should be fun. Key takeaway, decide what you want your listeners to feel, then paint pictures or tell stories to inspire those feelings. 5, kiss your listeners. You might know another KISS acronym, KISS for Keep It Simple Stupid. I don't like the second S. No acronym's going to insult my listeners. So let's upgrade it and add a technique while we're at it. The second S means squared, like in math, multiplying the same thing by itself. It's the principle of repetition, another way to make your message more memorable. Keep it simple, squared. You'll often hear repetition in great communication. A famous, inspiring example is Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. For the points you really want to drive home, simplicity plus repetition can add punch. You can say, "Let me emphasize," or "I'd like to highlight," then repeat your important point. In my big VP example, there were several repetitions, including 2 times about the bald head kiss, which also doubles up as the acronym for this 5th technique. Make your message more memorable. If your listeners remember more, your impact increases, and they can share your message with others, enhancing your reputation. You can use the burly boss kisser as a fun way to remember 5 ways to make your message more memorable. Grab their mental lapels, paint a picture, tell a sticky story, put emotion in motion, and then finally, remember always to kiss your listeners. Keep it simple, squared. Kiss them once, kiss them twice to recall your advice. Has anyone ever tried to persuade you, and when you don't agree, they say the same thing, but louder or slower, because the problem can't be that they're unconvincing. It must be that you've lost your hearing or your brain. Our passion to persuade often exceeds our capacity to convince because we tend to use a narrow range of tactics. But what persuades us might be unconvincing to our listeners. A broader range of persuasive tactics will help you succeed more often with more people across more situations. Let's cover a checklist of 12 effective tactics. Identify which ones you can use more often. First is rational analysis. This includes reasoning, logic, data, weighing pros versus cons, or costs and benefits. Rational analysis is important, but often insufficient. People can differ legitimately in their reasoning, data is rarely complete, and the future is often uncertain. I worked with an executive at a major media company who had tried several times to persuade the CFO to adopt a much-needed, improved customer relationship management software system. The executive provided a compelling cost-benefit analysis, but the CFO had seen plans that looked great on spreadsheets turn disastrous when they encountered the real world. The executive finally succeeded when he supplemented his analysis with several tactics that follow, such as, number 2, cite credible sources. Credible sources can be reputable institutions, such as leading research centers, prestigious universities, or foundations. You can also quote individuals, experts with strong credentials or high standing. The more credible the institution or person you cite, the stronger your persuasive power. Number 3, if there are policies, rules, procedures, standards, laws, or guidelines relevant to your listeners, reference them. If your recommendation is in line with an important policy or process, and not following your recommendation would violate that policy or process, make it known. Number 4, clarify pain and gain. How does your recommendation help your listeners accomplish what they want? Or what concerns, risks, headaches, or problems does it prevent or help them avoid? If they follow your advice, what rewards can they gain or what penalties can they avoid? 5, initiate reciprocation or exchange. People tend to respond more favorably to others who've already helped them. Can you add value proactively to your listeners even before you ask anything of them? Or can you pledge to do something of value for them if they adopt your proposal? 6, establish urgency or scarcity. Make it clear that now is the time to act. Create a sense of urgency and explain why time, resources, or supplies are limited. Explain why your listeners will be too late if they wait. 7, align with values, principles, or mission. People want to be seen and known as acting in line with values such as fairness or generosity to others in need. People don't want to be seen as hypocritical by acting contrary to important principles. The executive from our earlier example used this to persuade the CFO to approve the new software. The company was passionate about customer service, and the executive created a short video showing a dismal day in the life of customers experiencing current problems the new software would prevent. He showed the issue as a core values violation, and it hit home with the CFO. 8, show how what you propose advances the organization's strategy or important performance goals beyond your own personal tasks, goals for the larger team or organization. This presents you as the opposite of self-serving, committed to the broader good. 9. Share success stories. Especially when uncertain, we tend to look to others like us or in our situation to help us decide. Give testimonials and share examples from similar individuals, teams, or organizations who've done what you propose or something like it, and show how well it's working for them. 10. Build from small to big. Show small wins that demonstrate progress in the direction of your larger persuasive objectives. Build momentum and invite others to join the bandwagon. Ask for small commitments or easy agreements to pave the way for even bigger commitments and more substantial agreements. Make it easy for them to buy in early and small, and it will be easier for them to buy in later and larger. 11. Lead by example. Albert Einstein said, "Leading by example isn't a way to influence, it's the way to influence." If you show the strength of your convictions by doing first what you want others to do, it's more convincing. You yourself become an additional source of credibility. 12. Like and be likable. This one's easy to underestimate, but research on the persuasive force of likability is very robust. Show a positive attitude, smile, encourage. People respond to the message and the messenger. Here's a great tool I learned from a mentor years ago. Just before you show up for a presentation, take a breath, clear your head, and say to yourself, "I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to see you." Then, act that way. So there it is, 12 different options. Before your next important meeting, go through the checklist and choose which tactics can advance your cause with your listeners. Going forward, use a diverse mix of tactics to appeal to your listeners' diverse perspectives. Don't focus on what's merely enough to convince you, but what's more than enough to convince them. A grown man in uniform once pointed in my dresser drawer and whispered hoarsely, "Ullmen, you're a disgrace. You call that a crease in your pajamas. Pathetic." I was a student at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. It's a military college, and this was during an inspection my freshman year. There are lots of inspections, and we were required to wear official uniforms at all times, even at night. So yes, laugh if you will, and you should. We were issued pajamas, and they had to look just so in the dresser for inspections. Now, I went on to enjoy my time in the military very much, but at this point, I was coming in for heavy criticism about my pajama dressing. I was so surprised, I didn't say anything. I was thinking, a crease? Has anyone ever ironed pajamas? He can't be serious. He sure sounded serious, though, especially when he went from whispering to yelling. But now, after many years, I see what he was really doing, and it's the reason I tell this story. Surely he was illustrating the use of volume change as an attention getter. It's one of 4 vocal techniques we'll cover here that enable you to add force and clarity when you really want to hit home with your listeners. Volume is how loud or soft you speak. Just like a volume control button when you listen to music, you can turn your vocal volume to be louder or softer for any word or sequence of words. The second element is pitch. Pitch is how high or low your voice is. Pitch is like volume. You can dial it up or down anytime. Same goes for all 4 elements. You can adjust each of them independently. Next is pace, your rate of speech, fast or slow. You can talk very rapidly, or slowly and very deliberately, or any pace in between. The 4th element is tone. That's the mood or spirit you want to create. You can set a serious tone that's more somber, weighty, or earnest, or you can set a lighthearted tone that's more cheerful, entertaining, and upbeat. One of the most common mistakes with vocals is to give them no thought at all and stay within a narrow or repetitive range on the 4 elements. The unintended impact can be that listeners think we lack belief in our message, or passion about what we're doing, or that we're nervous and insecure. We often feel inside like we're being more expressive than how it actually comes across on the outside to our listeners. Often, it's because our voice sounds different in our own heads when we're speaking as compared to their ears when they're listening. So add variation in your vocals, some expressiveness, some modulation in the 4 elements. Don't let your listeners think you lack confidence or energy. Here's another tip. Add some vocal variety, especially where it matters most. Choose the most important points or phrases you want your listeners to remember. Then, add vocal techniques to emphasize and draw attention to them. Quick example. I coached a leader who often ended sentences with rising pitch. It made his statements sound like questions, like I'm doing now. The impact of that repetitive pattern was to make him sound less authoritative. Instead, when you want to emphasize a point with authority and confidence, dial your pitch from relatively higher to low. Like that. I put a pace change in there too. How much you adjust any or all of the 4 dials is dependent on your purpose, situation, and audience. How do you establish guidelines for that? Well, this is where Captain Pajamas from our opening story comes back in. Well, sort of. We recruit him as a reminder to look for examples in your organization or industry. Notice what works and what doesn't on you and others and how leaders use their voices. As an action step, pick 3 leaders in your experience who you find especially effective. Over the next 2 weeks, I want you to pay attention to how they use their voice as a leadership tool. Observe how they use each of the 4 elements: volume, pitch, pace, and tone. Don't mimic them directly, but notice if they use any of the 4 elements in ways you want to adapt to your style. In which situations should you speak louder, softer, higher, lower, faster, slower, with more gravitas, or with a lighter spirit? Study those role models and ask for feedback from people who see you in action to make smart choices about how to use your voice for more impact in any situation. Your meetings, presentations, and, hey, you never know, just in case, the occasional visit from Captain Pajamas. Did you know that body language can increase your impact before your meeting, before you even see the people or they see you? Research shows that taking on a high-power posture, like standing up straight, hands on your hips, that can increase hormone levels associated with power and decrease the levels associated with stress. It also results in people feeling more powerful than they did just 2 minutes before. Adjust your posture before you start, and you'll do yourself a favor. Stand stronger, start stronger. Now, it's not only posture. There's other research that shows how you carry yourself more generally. Your physical presence, gestures, movement, eye contact. These things sometimes have much more influence than your words on people's impressions about you and your message. Here are a few tips. Posture. When you're communicating, take on a confident stance. Don't slouch or stand too rigidly. Stand like someone comfortably in control of themselves and in charge of the situation. Have a home base position, a comfortable, confident default position to prevent looking awkward or using unconscious nervous movements. By home base, I mean that you should have your body aligned and erect and have a place to put your hands and arms that feels natural. A home base position that I like is hands over the stomach, like this, comfortably holding them without tension in your hands or arms. It's easy to come back to that position from any gestures and easy to hold the position while still looking natural. You want to avoid fidgeting with a pen, keys, or playing with your watch, jewelry, and so forth, which is associated with nerves or a lack of confidence. Be careful about interlacing your fingers because tension can flow there and you can wring your hands or wrestle with your thumbs or start toying with a ring. Having a good home base position also keeps you from sinking your hands in your pockets or crossing your arms for too long, making it look like you're closed or defensive. Also, coming from your home base position, it's easy to use movement and gestures to reinforce your points in a way that flow easily and look natural. Now for gestures, you typically want to stay right in this region, gesturing off of your home base position. It looks natural, you can count off points, or compare one thing to another, or make a transition from one part to the next. Be fluid in your movement, not feverish and not frozen. The same thing goes for facial expressions. Just as your posture shouldn't be frozen from head to foot, don't freeze your face. Use it. Look interested, energized, and engaged. Don't forget to smile, and smile genuinely. Remember the importance of likability and projecting that attitude of, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to see you. Let it show. Do show emotion aligned with your message and tone, but, and this is important, maintain your professional poise. You want to create the impression that you genuinely feel and understand, but you don't want to go overboard and make it look like you're out of control or that feelings are pushing you off kilter. Eye contact is crucial. Look from individual to individual and bring in all areas of the room wherever people are sitting. Move smoothly from one person to the next or from one person to a visual aid or object that you're referring to. Don't dart your eyes around or look over people's heads or favor one side of the room, a common mistake. Use your eyes like a leader, connecting with people and covering the space. So, of the body language elements we covered, posture, gestures, facial expressions, and eye contact, which is most important for you to focus on to increase your positive impact? Pick one of them and make some adjustments over the next 2 weeks. Even little adjustments can make a big difference. There's a FedEx commercial that brings home the point in a fun way. It's a corporate meeting, people sitting around a table. Boss with coiffed hair and a sharp suit says with authority, "We've got to cut costs, people. Ideas?" A normal-looking guy gives a great answer, but nobody responds. A pause, then the boss says, "Okay, how about this?" He gives the same answer and everyone agrees. "Oh, wow, that's great, that's fantastic." The normal guy says, "You just said the same thing I did, only you did this." The boss says, "No, I did this." Everyone agrees again. "Oh, yes, now that makes the difference." Now, it pokes fun at office politics nonsense we've all experienced, but there's a piece of helpful truth in it too. Body language best practices are a great way to increase your positive impact. And now you know what they are, so you can put them into action. Wait, scratch that. What I meant to say was, and now you know what they are, so you can put them into action. A few years ago, I saw a great example of executive presence, but one that might surprise you. It was at a special leadership development program in a leading global media firm. Each year they select 15 high-potential executives from around the world and give them a high-stakes project to complete as a team over several weeks. They need to self-organize, choose a leader, complete the project, and present their recommendations to the CEO. They're under intense scrutiny, being evaluated and compared against each other in everything they do, and they know it. The group usually has 15 vice presidents, but in this case, there was one gentleman from a Brazilian office, we'll call him Marcos, who was one rank lower than the others. The other VPs didn't know him before the program began, and he was the youngest person in the group. And yet, they chose Marcos as their leader. I asked the participants why. One said, "Whenever Marcos talks, I learn something. He doesn't compete or posture. When he speaks, I want to pay attention." That answer crystallizes a great way to think about executive presence. How can you be seen and heard and have others want to know your perspective, even in competitive environments, even when your listeners don't know you? Now, how can you strengthen executive presence? By focusing on 3 areas: perspective, poise, and projection. It begins with perspective, stays on track with poise, and is made evident through projection. Let's cover the 3 areas in order. People with executive presence have a broader perspective that comes from a strong underlying passion to make things better beyond their own concerns. They think beyond their job description, and they lead beyond their role. They help teams explore why they're doing things to ensure the work aligns with positive priorities and values. They consider long-term implications of their choices and facilitate discussions about that. They're curious about how others outside the current meeting will be affected by decisions, and they bring those considerations into the discussion. In short, they think ahead in terms of time, place, and people, and help others to do it too. That's the broader perspective, connecting today's conversations with tomorrow's bigger picture progress. But under pressure, it could be challenging to keep that broader perspective in view, and that's where poise comes in. People with executive presence tend to stay poised and composed despite stress, fear, or uncertainty. Building poise starts with self-awareness. When do you lose your poise? We all have triggers that throw us off. What's yours? The common ones include interpersonal conflict, time crunches, resource reductions, dealing with ambiguity, people failing to do what they say, or any number of personal fears and insecurities. We all have loss of poise patterns, and it's so empowering to find them. Identify the situations that tend to throw you off center, then replace ineffective responses with broader perspective behaviors. Pause, take a breath, stay calm, and carry yourself like a leader who knows the current crisis will inspire better outcomes. Maintain your poise so you can project yourself with confidence, clarity, and force. That's our 3rd key factor, projection. Strong projection is the opposite of blending in and doing what others do. It's stepping up and standing out with professional poise, especially when it matters. Executive presence leaders take a stand. They don't dither and they don't hide. To get seen and heard, you need to have something to say. Here are some best practices for strong projection. 1. Take clear points of view on important choices at hand. 2. Support your point of view with examples and evidence. 3. Challenge others to do the same. 4. Admit when you're wrong, but do it firmly with self-assurance and acknowledge the other person who advanced your thinking. Give confident credit. I was wrong about that. Thank you. 5. Respond decisively when challenged. Note, that's decisively, not defensively. But if it turns out you were wrong about something, go back to number 4. 6. Whether you're right or wrong, acknowledge others and give credit. Step up and stand out, but don't isolate yourself. You're not leading if no one else comes with you. bring others along. What Marcos did with the executive team aligned precisely with these guidelines. He spoke up, but with broader perspective substance, not self-serving gibberish. He challenged others to express their best views, and they respected him for it. Why? Because he projected himself with clarity, force, and confidence, but without being arrogant or disrespectful. He was secure enough to want others to be strong too. Isn't that something that we admire in others? And what's ineffective presence after all? It's being narrowly self-serving instead of an honest broker with the broader perspective. It's cowering or raging instead of holding poise. It's acting with professional immaturity instead of projecting yourself like a seasoned pro. Like Marcos, you don't need to be a certain age or have a certain title to gain executive presence if you focus on 3 key things. See the broader perspective, maintain your poise, and project yourself with clarity, force, and confidence. I consulted to a finance executive we'll call Tim from a large global tech service firm whose client opened a routine contract renewal meeting with this stunner. Do you think we should be paying $10,000 per service phone call? Their math was correct. That year the client paid $2.5 million for unlimited service phone calls, but only used 250 of them. The client usually accepted a small increase for inflation because they were happy with the service. Not this time. Caught off guard, Tim said, "We'll get back to you," thinking the client would give them time to update their proposal. Not so. This abrupt meeting happened on a Friday. On Monday, the client sent out a request for proposal, inviting the tech firm's toughest competitors to take their business. Tim's easy meeting had become a nightmare. He was in big trouble. His reputation was on the line. But, as Tim tells the story, we could have avoided it all by thinking of their perspective. We thought everything was fine because we heard nothing to the contrary. We thought about them, but we didn't think like them. How can you avoid Tim's mistake and incorporate your listener's perspective into your own actions? Well, sometimes you can ask them directly. This is what Tim realized. He said, before the meeting, just ask them, what would you like from us? What are your expectations? What's the best use of your time when we meet? Even better, he said, ask check-in questions long before the meeting. How are you doing? How are we doing? How can we improve? Remember, what matters to them is what matters to them. The best way to bridge the intent-impact gap is to go to the other side. Clarify expectations proactively. Ask them. Show you're interested in their perspective. This way, you gain crucial insight, and you send a clear signal that what matters to them matters to you. But sometimes it's uncomfortable, politically inappropriate, or unfeasible as a practical matter to ask your listeners directly for their input before you meet. What then? In some cases, you can ask others who know your listeners well for their suggestions. If that won't work, all's still not lost, because you can always do this. Go back to the think, feel, do questions, but answer them from their point of view. Think questions. What do they want to learn, be informed about, or understand? Feel questions. What's their attitude about this topic, situation, project, your performance, etc.? Do questions. What actions do they want to be taken, by whom, and when? It's a great thought experiment. Go all the way to their side. Pretend you're actually them and answer the questions as if you're being interviewed. Get creative, get some help, brainstorm with trusted colleagues. Here's another tool to go to their side. Let's call it gain and pain. It's clarifying what your listeners want to gain, that is, achieve or move toward, along with their pain, or what they want to avoid or move away from. Brainstorm ideas about what your listeners want to gain. What are their goals, short-term and long-term? Hopes and aspirations? Best case scenarios for their priorities. Future opportunities. Here are some pain questions. What are their problems, risks, stresses, and concerns? What keeps them awake? Worst case scenarios for their priorities. Future failures that they fear. This is what Tim ended up doing. He essentially went through the gain and pain questions and discovered a creative win-win to keep the client. He reduced their fee by 7%, reasonable given their workload dropped a lot. And they secured a new 4-year commitment to avoid going through that scare cycle annually. So, always remember to answer your listeners' think, feel, do questions and their gain and pain questions from their point of view. You'll add to the gain and avoid a lot of pain, both for them and for you. Which group is the most difficult for people in organizations to communicate with? People hierarchically above them, below them, or at their same level? The answer is, it can be any of the 3. It's not a trick answer. The only answer that matters is the answer for you. And whichever group is more challenging for you, you have plenty of company. It turns out people tend not to excel naturally at communicating in all three directions. One or two is a strength, and the other is a relative weakness. Which is which varies from person to person. Even the strongest communicators tend not to be fully confident and comfortable in all three directions. They work at it and improve, and so can we. Here are some tips for gaining more traction with people at each level. For people hierarchically above, focus on increasing your credibility. Hierarchical people above you, or seniors, have in mind a pivotal credibility question. Do I care what you think? If the answer in their mind is no, then you can get dismissed very quickly, and not just mentally. They might abruptly end the meeting. Reinforcing this point, an executive I worked with a while ago said, "When people want my time, I quickly assess whether they are time makers or time takers. Do they make time for me by knowing what they're doing and being ready and willing to step up? Or do they take time away by not being prepared or unwilling to show initiative and by complaining instead of doing?" So, with hierarchical seniors, build your credibility. Be a time maker, not a time taker. Moving on to peers, the focus factor for them is trust. Their crucial trust question is, are you for me or against me? If the answer in their minds is against me, it's very bad news. You're branded as an adversary, and a defensive instinct kicks in. They'll be skeptical of you no matter what your true intentions may be. It's like in the United Nations when someone is listening to a foreign language and a translator interprets through headphones. But what if the translator decided to undermine the speaker? That's what it's like when peers feel they can't trust you. It's like a translator who adds, "That's what he says, but what is he hiding?" Or, "Yeah, but what does she really mean?" Build trust with peers. Keep looking for ways to come through for them. Show them you have their back. Through your consistent trust-building actions, eliminate any possibility of that distrust translator whispering in their ear. For hierarchical juniors, the focus factor is motivation. Their key motivation question is, do you inspire me? After you meet with them, do they leave more positively energized to try harder or less? If they feel taken for granted or treated like interchangeable machine parts, they might dial down their effort level or say things to others that undermine your reputation. Now, different people have different motivations, so with hierarchical juniors, build your understanding of what motivates them. Make that a priority in how you interact with them. Credibility, trust, and motivation. All three matter at all three levels, but if you want to prioritize, you can focus each where it matters most. Here's one more tip. Use your strongest level to develop your weakest level. For example, let's say you're strong with peers, and you want to improve your effectiveness with hierarchical seniors. Find one of your peers who is especially effective with hierarchical seniors and ask that peer for some suggestions and feedback. You might say, "Hey Guillermo, I'm meeting next week with senior leader so-and-so. Can I run my plan by you and hear your thoughts? I'd really appreciate it." And once the conversation is going, look for additional insights from that peer about what he or she does to be effective with hierarchical seniors. And don't forget, this is a peer, so we know what else to do. Remember, the focus factor for peers is trust. So, deposit an action payment into their trust account. Do something for them to increase your trustworthiness from their perspective. For example, find out something specific you can do to be helpful to Guillermo and make a commitment. Then deliver on it early and with even more impact than he expects. Pulling everything together, updating our original question, it has an updated answer. Which hierarchy group is the most difficult for you to communicate with? Answer? It doesn't matter, because you know where to focus for all three. And you also know how to use your strongest area to help you gain even more impact in the others. Whether you're communicating hierarchically up, down, or sideways, when you know where to focus, you can always go forward. My friend Scott went to a Hawaiian island with his wife to visit her family. After a long day, he stood up and said to others in the room, "Oh, I'm so tired. I need to go to sleep. Good night, everybody." The next morning, his wife told him, "You embarrassed me last night. You left without making the proper departure." Turns out the cultural custom when leaving is to compliment each person on what they did that day and give them a chance to compliment you. It's a nice tradition, isn't it? Now, Scott unintentionally violated a cultural norm, and in so doing, didn't even realize the negative impact on others in the room. But it's not just countries or regions that have cultures, organizations have cultures too. So just like Scott on that Hawaiian island, in organizations, we need to adjust to the culture so we don't undermine ourselves. The impact of cultural miscues can be disrespectful or even offensive, because they violate the norms for the way we do things here, strongly held beliefs, values, or customs. To enable you to navigate culture at your organization, or if you're meeting with people from another organization, let's cover 6 factors, common ways that organizational cultures differ. All cultures have strengths and weaknesses, and either side of these 6 factors can be functional or dysfunctional. We're not judging that here. Whatever the culture is, I want you to be aware of it so you can be successful in it. First factor, task versus relationship. Do meetings start with, let's get down to business right away, task culture, or instead, let's build some rapport and get to know each other and share some social or even personal matters, relationship culture. Can you count on things getting done on time every time, task culture? Or does that depend on what the definition of done is and the definition of on time, relationship culture? Second factor, competitive versus cooperative. Are you in a survival of the fittest influencers environment where you need to highlight your personal accomplishments, competitive culture, or is supporting others, crediting their accomplishments, and collaborating across boundaries more valued, cooperative culture? The third factor is direct versus indirect. Is it give me the blunt, honest truth, even in public, and even if it's ugly, direct culture? Or is that way too dangerous to do, and what's really preferred is diplomacy intact, indirect culture? One senior executive I worked with who absolutely thrived in direct cultures said one of her guiding principles was this: if you're not causing conflict, then I don't need you. She was very successful in that direct culture, but would need to adapt to be as successful in an indirect culture. Fourth factor, hierarchical versus non-hierarchical. Do things such as job title, rank, and status matter a great deal in how you interact and communicate with people? Hierarchical. Or are those things just labels that no one cares about? Non-hierarchical. I once worked with an organization that let everyone come up with their own job titles, whatever they wanted. One guy put on his business card as his job title in bold font right below his name, head of cabbage. Now that's non-hierarchical. The fifth factor is process-driven versus spontaneous. Are there methods and operating guidelines in place for how you're supposed to get things done? Clear steps you're supposed to follow? Process-driven. Or is that viewed as stifling and bureaucratic, and instead people adapt as things unfold and treat all challenges as fresh and new? Spontaneous. When people try to bring process into a spontaneous culture, which is common as organizations mature, it's very challenging. And in those cases, you need to keep proving how process generates more ideas and innovative solutions. And the sixth factor, short-term versus long-term focus. Do people focus significant attention on near-term results and reactions, short-term focus? Or do they tend to view current conditions as temporary ups and downs on a steady march toward a more distant future vision, long-term focus? I worked with a leader whose publicly traded firm has to report financial data on a quarterly basis. Expressing how hard it is to lead long-term initiatives in a short-term culture, he said, in this company, everything in the quarter is for the quarter. Until next quarter, when it happens again. Okay, now I want you to assess your culture and take action on it. First, for each of the 6 factors, which way does your culture lean and how much? Go through each factor, and if you can, compare your perspective with others in your organization. Second, based on who succeeds and fails in your organization, which of the 6 factors is the most important one for you to align with and not violate? Make that a priority when you communicate and interact with others. Now it's time for me to go, but as I learned from my friend in Hawaii, I should make a graceful, complimentary exit, and hopefully not mess up the pronunciation. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy navigating your organizational culture and have the impact you want and deserve. Ahui ho aku kako. Until we meet again. Gore Vidal said, politics is made up of 2 words, poly, which is Greek for many, and ticks, which are blood-sucking insects. That's not the word's real derivation, but for many of us it captures the reality of politics and organizations. Just like in sports, some people play fair, some don't. Sometimes they get away with it for a while, and sometimes not. Organizational politics is here to stay, and it can either work for you or against you. The real question is not whether to be political or non-political, it's how to be politically aware. I'm not saying politics is always unhealthy, but there are 3 fundamentals you can use to navigate politics in a healthy, positive way, even if others sometimes don't. First fundamental, learn what's not on the org chart. Everyone knows about the formal org chart, with lines connecting boxes to show who reports to whom. That's a map about how things supposedly get done. But in addition to the org chart, you need to learn how things actually get done. Learn the culture, customs, systems, processes, and policies. Learn also about the people, who makes which decisions, who influences the decision makers, and what matters to both of them. Here's an example of how someone did this to turn a frustrating situation to his advantage and an adversary into an ally. I worked with an IT executive we'll call Larry, newly promoted to vice president for a large global retail firm, transferred to a region away from U.S. headquarters. Now, another leader in that region had tremendous influence. He had been in the role for several years, and even though he was officially at the same level as Larry, he snubbed Larry's initial attempts to meet with him. According to the org chart, that shouldn't happen, but it did. Larry could insist he attend certain meetings with his counterpart, but he knew that forcing the issue would earn him a powerful adversary, and every subsequent interaction with the other leader would be a retribution reminder. To learn what wasn't on the org chart, he methodically met with diverse stakeholders. He found the best plan was to connect with the other leader's direct reports. Soon Larry was adding value to them, and they kept telling their boss, who eventually invited Larry to all the meetings he wanted to attend and more. The second fundamental is build your political capital. Keep developing your own informal network, the people you know across your organization. Reach out to people and add value to them to earn their trust. Build those relationships before you need them. Gravitate toward solid citizens throughout the organization, people who prove themselves trustworthy and are truly striving for the organization's greater good. Treat everyone with respect, always. Don't get sucked into trading punches with politically devious types. Stay poised and professional. Don't get dragged into their tricky territory. It's bad for you, and they're probably setting you up. In disagreements, don't take things personally or make things personal with others. Never gloat when you win, or you'll earn an ongoing enemy. Make allies, avoid making adversaries. When things get heated, think ahead. It's not just you versus him or her right here and now. You're in a complex web of people with different motives and agendas, and the web remembers. Third fundamental, secure stakeholder support. Drive for results within your area of responsibility using a 4-step method. First, clarify what success is. What are the specific outcomes you're trying to achieve? If things go as well as you want, what happens for whom? Write this down in detail. Second, create a list of key stakeholders. Who are the people who will most influence whether you reach those successful outcomes? Regardless of what the org chart says, who really has a say or an essential role? Who needs to contribute, take action, give input, make decisions, or grant approvals? Third, what will it take to influence your key stakeholders? What will they need, on their terms, in order to do what needs to be done? Find out not only what influences them, but who influences them. And fourth, based on your prioritized list of key people and your supporting plans to earn positive, motivated responses from them, take action on those plans and adjust as you learn more. Now, Gore Vidal warned us about those insects of organizational life. So use the 3 fundamentals to fend them off. Use them also to keep expanding your political awareness and follow the ever-applicable advice from Pericles, leader from ancient Greece where the word for politics was really derived, who said, "Just because you don't take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you." Where I live in Los Angeles, there's a scenic, winding canyon road that goes to the ocean. You have to drive slow, but the view is much better and you get to the beach faster than if you took the highways. It's a great metaphor for listening. Listening is the canyon road of communication, where you go slower but get there sooner. It's tough when we're pressured to get things done. It feels like we're compromising results. But done well, the slowdown actually accelerates influence, relationship building, trust, and credibility. How can this be? It's because we tend to judge ourselves by our intentions, but others evaluate us by our impact. They can't read our hearts and minds. They have to go on what happened to them. After being with us, they determine whether they came out better or not, on their terms, not ours. Effective listening is crucial to close the intent-impact gap. To understand our actual impact and invite genuine buy-in, we need to listen with a strong personal motive to learn and understand. But psychologically, it's trickier than it sounds. We have a blind spot in our brains that gets in the way. What we hear is filtered through our own needs, biases, experiences, culture, and agenda. Even when we try, we often hear what others say, but miss what they mean. And when we misunderstand, it's easier to blame our listeners than see our need to change, because you can't see through a blind spot. So we need a way to listen around our blind spots. To do it, based on my research for my book, Real Influence with Mark Goulston, we outlined 4 different levels of listening. The first 3 levels are the most common, but fall short of what's needed to achieve real understanding and connection. Level 1, avoidance listening. It's listening over people. Listeners who listen over others are the people who say, uh-huh, while clearly showing no interest in what the other person is saying. They look preoccupied, and they usually are. Sometimes they don't even stop checking email or texting. You can say, the building's on fire and there's life on Mars. And they'll respond, yep, nah, good, you do that. Level 1 listening can annoy, exasperate, or even infuriate the person who's talking. Level 2, defensive listening, listening at people. This is preparing your counterpoints while the person is still speaking. It's being quick to react and slow to consider. It's paying more attention to the response-generating voice in our head than the voice of the other person. We're just waiting for them to stop moving their lips. And why are they still doing that anyway? We're ready to talk. Level 2 listeners are often seen as defensive, self-centered, combative, and over time, people resent them because they're exhausting. Level 3, problem-solving listening. This is actually listening to someone. This is the most common one when we really are trying to listen. It's listening to accomplish things. Problem-solving listeners listen to help us move forward. Now, if people want your solutions, this approach can work. But if you presume to offer fixes they don't want or need, people will feel frustrated, misheard, and even resentful. Problem-solving listeners often have positive intentions to help, to be efficient. It seems like a great option when everyone's busy and overtasked. But when your solutions are disconnected from their desires, it sets you back. Level 4, connective listening, listening into others. This is listening of the highest order, and it's the human listening that all of us crave. It's listening into other people to discover what's going on inside them. It's listening on their terms, not yours. It's committing to understand and establish genuine rapport. So remember, you're listening to learn. If you haven't learned, you haven't listened. Ask questions like these. What does that mean for you? What do you think about? What's your perspective on? Here are some other ways to put level 4 listening into action. This is so helpful in work and life. I really encourage you to find a trusted person to work with on these questions. When do you find yourself most challenged to use level 4 listening, and why? With whom is it most important that you raise your level of listening? And who has modeled level 4 listening for you in your life, and how can you follow their example? Using level 4 listening isn't always easy, but it leads to real insight, connection, and understanding. It leads you closer to the impact you really want. On the canyon road of communication, slow down and pay attention. It's worth it. You'll enjoy the ride and still get there sooner. One of my MBA students said his favorite traditional Chinese word is listen, which includes characters for ears, eyes, mind, and heart. He said this reminds him you need to use all of these to truly listen to someone. He added the word certainly doesn't include characters for mobile phone, emails from a scary boss, or project due dates. Effective listening is a fully involved experience that takes our wholehearted attention. It's looking, hearing, and feeling into another's perspective and learning from it. It's an immersion in understanding. A key principle for doing it well is to listen like a partner, not a critic. To do that, strive to understand people's perspectives on their own terms. For the moment, set your agenda aside. You can come back to that later. Resist the temptation to defend it or advance it. Don't listen with your agenda in the way. Set it aside for now. Listen here. Why set it aside? Well, for one thing, to respond accurately, you need to understand accurately what it is you're really responding to. You want to respond to underlying meaning, not just surface-level words. This is how to connect and build understanding and rapport, and not create an intent-impact gap. You need to connect with what they really mean, not the personal reactions, defenses, or justifications that their words might involuntarily trigger in you. To listen like a partner, also suspend for now that voice inside that wants to judge and evaluate. Take the microphone away from that inner critic. Remember, you can evaluate later, after you really understand what you're evaluating. You're not giving in and you're not giving anything away. You're just listening without premature evaluation, which can be embarrassing. I have an architect friend who has a great way to remember this. He designs buildings, courtyards, and landscapes, and he points out that everything new needs its own space. He thinks in similar terms about listening when he's working with his clients or his team. To listen well, he creates a space in his mind uncluttered with other things. It's open territory where someone else's perspective is invited in. He doesn't erase his own ideas or surrender his agenda. He simply opens a new space, just as he would turn to a clean page in his sketchpad to draw a new structure. For him, a new conversation is like a new design. It's a co-creation, not a critique session. That's listening like a partner. Get alongside them, at least figuratively, and sync up with their ideas, motives, attitudes, and mindsets. For this phase of listening, think of yourself as their partner in perceiving, someone motivated to fully and accurately represent their ideas and interests in ways they would appreciate. That's the standard of success. Can you yourself communicate what they think and feel to their satisfaction? Try it. Tell the person, I want to make sure I'm getting this right. Or, it's important to me that I understand. Tell me if I do. Then say what you've learned and see if they say back to you, perfect, you got it. Listening isn't passive or reactive, it's creative. But we can't really create, we can't really get that connection and understanding that's possible from real listening if we bring multitasking, preoccupations, or a preconceived agenda into the listening zone. A leader I coached came up with a great way of expressing this. He said, when I'm listening, I want to make the other person feel like they're the most important person in the world. Now, you've probably heard that expression. He added something to it that really stuck with me. He said, I want to make the other person feel like they're the most important person in the world. Then he added, because they are. For him, it's not just a technique, it's truth. It's a commitment. It's the kind of person and leader he wants to be, the impact that he wants to have. It's challenging to do, so to get started, I want you to prioritize 2 people in particular over the next 2 weeks. It's most important for you to focus on doing this with. When you're listening, try to make the other person feel like nothing else matters in the world but them, and that you're committed to understand their point of view. And make it known. Say your intention aloud to them in your own words. I really want to make sure I'm understanding. Tell me if I'm missing anything. Then check in with them to see if you got it right. And say thank you. Remember, in the listening zone, there's no defending yourself or setting them straight. Marshall Goldsmith said, it's amazing how well you can listen if you're only allowed to say thank you. Give it a try over the next 2 weeks. Check yourself along the way. Am I listening like a partner right now or a critic? And always say thank you at the end. Thank you. Scottish composer and percussionist Evelyn Glennie lost nearly all her hearing as a young girl, yet went on to a groundbreaking career in music that's included winning Grammy Awards. When somebody asks her, how do you hear? She responds, how do you hear? Is it only with your ears? For Glennie, and for us too, listening is more than being able to repeat back what people say. Listening is not only hearing, it's understanding. To do it well, we need to listen to what's said and unsaid, and also how it's being said. Let's focus first on listening to what's said and unsaid. It's important to hear what people say accurately. As Mark Twain said, the difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and the lightning bug. If you miss something, or you're not sure you heard accurately, ask them, because you want to make sure you're getting it right. At this point, you're not evaluating, just tracking for accuracy and understanding. Here are 4 ways to track what they say and don't say. Why does what the other person say make sense on their terms? Why are they saying this now instead of sooner or later? Why are they emphasizing these points instead of something else? And what else could they say that would explain even more? Sometimes the key to understanding is what someone isn't saying. I coached a client frustrated that his advice to a talented direct report about collaborating wasn't working. It turns out what the direct report left unsaid was how much he feared conflict. He understood the collaboration advice, but he couldn't use it because he feared it would put him into conflict. That was the real issue, but he couldn't say it directly. He didn't want to look weak to his manager. Understanding what he wasn't saying was the key to turning things around. In this case, as very often, there were probably clues in those earlier conversations between the manager and his direct report that fall under the next guideline. Listen to how it's being said. People send signals about what they mean with their vocals and body language that sometimes differ from the words they say. As we go through the next points, think about someone whose real underlying meaning you might sometimes miss, and see if any of these signals might come up. First, vocals. When others speak, notice variations in their volume, pitch, pace, and tone. When do these change? Are the variations consistent with the words they're saying, or do their vocals send a different message, and why? Second, body language. Notice posture, movement, gestures, eye contact, and facial expressions. Are these congruent with what they're saying, or do they tell a different story? Third, emotions. What's the person apparently feeling? Are their emotions in sync with their message? If not, what might make sense of that disconnect? For disconnects between people's words and their vocals, body language, or emotions, what's the underlying cause? How would they explain it if they were fully aware of it and fully open and honest with you about it? Now, you might not know for sure, but be considerate, open to understanding, ask thoughtful questions, and you'll connect more strongly and have even more impact. Now, back to our example with the manager and the direct report talking about collaboration. If the manager explains collaboration steps 3 separate times to the otherwise smart and energetic direct report, who keeps failing to take those steps, that won't make sense to the manager, who gets frustrated and thinks the direct report is irresponsible or lazy. But as Sherlock Holmes once said to Watson, "You look, but you do not observe." If the direct report drops his volume or eye contact or looks less comfortable in his body language when the manager is explaining for the second and third time about collaboration steps, it would make perfect sense that despite the direct report saying, "Yes, I'll do it," he really means, "I probably won't, and I'm uncomfortable saying why." Not irresponsible in this case, not lazy, something else. Based on many years of coaching experience, the direct report was probably giving subtle signals somewhere in his vocals and body language that the conversation for him wasn't just about collaboration. There was a different conversation going on in his head, unspoken but more potent, about fearing conflict. If the manager notices those clues, the real issue can be addressed, trust enhanced, performance improved, and everyone better off much sooner. That's often the difference between words and meaning. It can make all the difference to build trust, connection, relationship, and stronger impact. So listen beyond the words, especially when you find yourself repeating discussions without making progress. As Evelyn Glennie implied, I coached a senior leader named Phil who is great at connecting with all types of people. I asked him how he does it, and he credits a turning point years back when his manager said Phil was trying too hard to make his mark in meetings, and it was turning people off. They saw him as a self-serving aggressor who was trying to look better than them. Phil said the lesson he learned that changed his career is the key to connecting with people is not to show off, but show interest. It starts with questions, and people like Phil, who are great at connecting with others, ask great questions. But sometimes it can get confusing to know what to ask. Let's cover 5 types of questions you can ask whenever you want to build stronger connection with others. The 5 connection questions trace a logical sequence from understanding a person's situation, through what's driving key choices, to where they really want to be, and how they can get there, and how you can help. Number 1, description questions. These explore what happened. You show genuine interest with questions about the situation your listener was in, along with how events unfolded. It's easy. Start with a courteous check-in about something that matters to them. How did the meeting go where you gave the project update? As they respond, picture in your mind's eye their situation and the sequence of events. To fill in the blanks, ask for relevant details about who did what, where, when, and how. Now don't go mechanically through that list. Just try to see it like you were there, and you'll naturally ask things like, who was there? What did she say? How did he respond? What did you do at that point? You're already showing your listener that what happened to them matters to you. You're also learning things to help you understand even more and add value. And that brings us to number 2, cause questions. These explore, why did things happen? Cause questions build directly on your description questions and enable you to show up as their ally to understand why things went the way they did. Going back to that project meeting update example, why do you think she asked that question? Why do you think he waited until then to speak up? I wonder why he was so interested in that data. You're going deeper with them now into causes and motives, which can help them make smarter choices going forward. And that takes us to number 3, best case questions. And these explore, what do you want to happen? Here you invite listeners to lay out their best case scenarios. What does success look like for them? If things go as well as possible, what would that mean for them? Best case questions are terrific. These are my favorite. You're fundamentally helping your listeners clarify their own positive preferred future, and you're showing up as a thought partner interested in their success on their terms. These are easy to ask for whatever is coming up for your listeners. In your next project update meeting, what's the best case scenario for you? What do you most want to accomplish? What's the most important thing you want them to know? Be upbeat when you ask and reassuring when they respond. Help them gain confidence and motivation from clarifying what they want. Number 4, possibility questions. These explore, what if something changes? These build directly on the best case questions. They help your listeners make progress toward their best case scenarios by helping them to consider opportunities and risks. As your listeners work toward their ideal outcomes, what can change? And what can they do to prepare? For example, in the next project update meeting, what if that senior leader asks you to speed up the schedule? What's your best way to respond? Keep a positive, helpful tone and be ready to ask question number 5, which naturally comes next. These are contribution questions, and they explore, how can I be helpful? Simply look for opportunities to offer assistance in whatever way is appropriate. Is there something I can do to help? How can I be most supportive? That's the sequence. Let's put it into action. For this coming week, practice using the 5 connection questions with trusted friends or colleagues, and get used to using them. The next week after that, in real situations, not just practice, ask each of the 5 connection questions at least once. Don't force it. You don't have to ask all 5 at one time to one person. Opportunities will come up for all of them in the course of normal work. They get easier each time, and like Phil from our opening example, you'll see how you can draw people toward you by going toward them, by thought partnering about what matters most to them. And don't forget that last question. Is there anything I can do to be helpful to you? Even if they just say no thank you, merely by asking, you stand out as someone willing to take an interest in their success and do something about it. Now, those are the kind of people who really impress us, and not by trying to be impressive. As Phil likes to say these days, when people ask him for advice, don't try to be interesting to people, be interested. Imagine someone in your office gets promoted. He isn't a personal friend, but you know him. What's the first thing you say to him? Congratulations, right? Easy. But what's the second thing you say? I learned this thought experiment from my mentor, Professor Sam Colbert, who says there's a single correct answer. I've done this activity many times in organizations. I ask people to write their answers anonymously. Typical answers are, you deserved it, or I'm so happy for you, or you must be thrilled. None is the best answer. Why not? Because they reflect the perspective of the person doing the congratulating, not the person getting promoted. Even responses like, how can I help you, as the second thing you say is easily seen as premature and self-serving, trying to get on his good side. After congratulations, Sam says, ask an empathy question. You say, congratulations. He says, thanks. And then you ask, what does it mean for you? Go for empathy. Find out what he thinks and feels instead of making assumptions. Maybe he's scared about it. Maybe he fears the additional responsibilities. Maybe he's anxious about harder work or more travel or concerned about his new boss. Remember, it's his promotion, not ours. And it's not just promotions. Empathy openings like this come up all the time if we'll notice. And they're golden opportunities to build trust and relationship that others miss. Here's what to do. To increase empathy, you want to get others on 3 different levels. Get the person, get their situation, and get their path to progress. First, get the person. Show that you understand the person as a unique individual. Be genuinely interested in their goals, priorities, interests, needs, motives, strengths, development areas, and concerns. Show you're intellectually open to their thoughts, ideas, analysis, and logic. Ask, what do you think? What's your take on this? I want to make sure if I'm following you. Tell me if I've got this right. Also, be emotionally open to their feelings, attitudes, passions, drives, and values. Just like in the "what's the second thing you say" situation, seek to understand what they're experiencing and why they feel the way they do. Ask them, how are you feeling about this? What's at stake for you here? What's the most important thing for you about this? However they respond, acknowledge the emotion and help them feel felt. Simply say, you sound really happy, or that seems really frustrating. They'll agree or clarify. Either is fine, because it feels great to be understood, or at least to know that someone's trying. When you do this right, the get the person stage, they say or indicate with their body language, you actually understand where I'm coming from on this. And that's what you're going for. Second, get their situation. Show you understand the circumstances they're in and the opportunities and challenges they face. Just like before, be open, interested, and demonstrate it. This time, about their situation. Ask things like, what's happening? Who's involved? What's at stake? What are their timelines? What do they need to overcome? Grasp the person's reality in a way that rings true to them. The standard of success here is that they say or indicate, you actually understand what I'm dealing with here. Now that's a great place to be. Think about how it applies to you, how you value the people who make the effort to genuinely get you instead of get something out of you, who really try to understand your situation without imposing their evaluation. These people stand out in a very positive way, and you can too with others. Plus, when you get the person and their situation, you position yourself to add even more value going forward. And that's the third get. Get their path to progress. Now, this is not about jumping to solutions for them or pressing your answers and perspectives on them. It's simply encouraging their progress on their own terms. You don't have to figure anything out for them. Just show up as someone that genuinely wants them to make progress. This is so much more powerful than it might seem. Teresa Amabile from Harvard's research with Stephen Kramer stands out. Studying multiple companies over 10 years, analyzing thousands of journal entries, they found, of all the things that can boost emotions, motivation, and perceptions during a workday, the single most important is making progress in meaningful work. That's the number one factor. Check out their book, The Progress Principle. Over 3/4 of what people judge to be their best days were triggered by making progress. Over 2/3 of their worst days were triggered by setbacks. Be an ally for any progress, however small. It's big. Ask, encourage, offer to help if you can. They'll thank you, and you'll hear comments along the lines of, I think I can do this. Get their path to progress. It's the best get you can give at work. So, whether the person just got promoted, or it's just another day, and whether it's after the first, second, or 10th thing that you say to them, build empathy by getting the person, their situation, and their path to progress. And you'll get more appreciation, trust, and stronger relationships in return. Have you ever been at a networking event or in the casual chit-chat phase with senior leaders before the meeting gets going, but somehow you find yourself talking about the weather when you don't give a darn about it, or yapping about traffic when it's boring you to tears, or any other inane topic while your inner voice is shouting at you, I couldn't care less about this, and I bet they feel the same. What are we doing? Or maybe the conversation was moving along, but suddenly it comes to a screeching halt. All at once, you don't know where to take it next, and a simple pause stretches into an awkward silence and then an oppressively uncomfortable nothingness. At that point, any topic would do, even weather or traffic. You're not alone, and it's not just for so-called small talk situations. Establishing authentic rapport is a crucial bridge builder, and rapport failures can cause people to perceive you as narrow-minded or being uncomfortable with yourself, or even as having a hidden agenda. Rapport isn't just superficial, because something more important registers more deeply, automatically. It's emotion, how people feel. Establishing rapport is fundamentally about connected emotion. I love how the poet Maya Angelou expressed it when she said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Test your experience. If you unexpectedly run into someone you haven't seen for years, even if you don't remember lots of specifics about what they said and did, you still have an immediate feeling reaction. That's the powerful, invisible math of emotion, and it starts with rapport. Anyone can build it because the secret of rapport is this: help others feel a little better. Simple as that. Take initiative to help them feel better in a way appropriate to their situation. You can help them feel more empowered, encouraged, appreciated, understood, capable, cared about, making progress, energized, or just happier. Here are 2 techniques to help you do it: something to ask and something to share. Here's the something to ask. You can almost always find a way to ask this question: what do you like most about? And then fill in the blank with whatever is appropriate to the person and situation. What do you like about your job, that project, this conference, working with this team? It immediately takes you to their perspective, demonstrates your interest in what interests them, and is emotionally positive. Then you can tweak the words. What's your favorite part of? Or what's the best part of? And then fill in the blank. As they respond, show you're interested. Say, that's really thought-provoking, or that's interesting. Use positive curiosity. I'd really like to hear more about, and then fill in the details. Asking questions isn't your only option, though, especially if your counterpart isn't naturally outgoing. You can also take the initiative with the same overarching objective to set a positive emotional tone and help them feel better. That's our second technique, something to share. What do you share? Something from your recent experience that you really liked or enjoyed or that helped you gain insight. I call this like, laugh, or learn. Keep track of things that you like or make you laugh or help you learn. They happen every day anyway, so notice them and share them whenever the time is right. Be emotionally generous. For example, when someone asks that usual question, how's it going? Or how are you doing? Instead of replying with a generic good or fine, dive right in. I'm in a great mood. My little daughter, she scored her first goal in soccer yesterday. She kicked it into her own goal, but hey, it's a start. Or, I saw a great movie, or I read a great article, and then add something specific and positive about the movie or article. With the right tone, sharing, not bragging, your like, laugh, or learns are the perfect way to signal your willingness to be open, and that you will also invite them to reciprocate. Do your kids play soccer? What do they like to do? Or, did you see that movie? What movies do you like? It takes almost no time and energy. It's just noticing the good stuff that comes your way and sharing it. Always have a fresh like, laugh, or learn to share. You'll add emotional value and help others be more comfortable about getting to know you and having you get to know them. It's another way to help them feel a little better. With practice, you get better and it gets easier. So practice anywhere. Networking events, in line at the supermarket, anywhere you can. Be brave. Go first. Try it with 3 different people this week. Give it a try. Build more rapport with friends and colleagues. Or build it with people you don't know. Now, sometimes you can't avoid having to drive in bad traffic and awful weather. But from now on, you don't have to talk about it. You've always got better things for both of you to do when you have something to ask and something to share. Mike Ditka, head coach during the Chicago Bears' Super Bowl winning season of 1985, once said about his team's flamboyant quarterback Jim McMahon, with whom he often had difficulties, "We have a strange and wonderful relationship. He's strange, and I'm wonderful." Well, there's humor, if not humility, in that quote, but also wisdom. Relationships are easy when they're effortless, but there's so much upside to go past easy and find creative ways to connect with people beyond those we automatically click with. The research is clear that stronger, broader relationships lead to better performance, job opportunities, health, wealth, happiness, just about any way you want to define success. Whatever your challenge or need in work and life, the right relationships save you a lot of time, money, and effort. Everything gets better with better relationships. This is an ongoing focus of my research, and I want to share the 5 action steps that leaders I've worked with over the years find most helpful to get results on their relationship building priorities. Number 1, don't just set performance goals, set people goals. Who are the best people for you to connect with to achieve your goals, to gain the knowledge, skills, and experience that you want to gain, to learn what you want to learn. Identify these people and reach out to them in a positive way. Ask for just a few minutes of their time. Make it easy for them to say yes. The worst they can do is say no, which is where you're at anyway if you don't even try. Good people like to connect with other good people who are going for something. And let me dispel a myth. There's no magic charisma gene that some people have and the rest of us don't, and so we're stuck. Real relationship building isn't about putting on a performance. It's about adding value. So don't let self-limiting assumptions get in the way of that. Instead, follow action step number 2. Learn what others want in work and life and help them get it. Be curious and care about their success. Ask about their goals, priorities, projects, and interests. Then look for ways to help with insights, personal stories, referrals, advice you've heard, articles, books, movie recommendations, anything. Even small contributions can make a big impression. Remember, it also adds value simply to help someone feel better. We like to be around people who help us feel better. And you don't need any power, status, expertise, or authority to do that. When you try to help others get what they want, many will naturally want to help you get what you want, which leads to action step number 3. Let others help you just as you want to help them. Good people naturally reciprocate and feel awkward if value is going entirely one way. Let them know what you're working toward. Put it out there with a positive tone. My goal is, or I'm trying to develop my ability to, or I'm looking for a, and then fill in the blank and tell them if they have any advice or suggestions, you're really open. You pay them a compliment that carries no burden and respects their insight and expertise. Good people will feel good about helping you. Give them the chance to do it. And you can multiply this value-adding effect with action step number 4. Make introductions. When you connect people, they think positively of you whenever they see that other person and are naturally reminded to introduce you to other people as well. Making introductions is a great habit. You listen and learn more about people you meet so you can connect those people who will gain from knowing each other. I know a legendary, amazingly successful insurance professional whose entire strategy for developing business over many years has been to make one introduction a day. That's it. Everything else follows from that one daily practice. One intro a day motivates him to meet more people, stay current with existing connections, and think about how to help both. He doesn't sell, he listens, and he makes intros. People come back to him because he's the kind of person they want to buy from. Put it all together with action step number 5. Do a weekly relationship review. Put a weekly 15-minute appointment with yourself on your calendar. Use that time to choose the best ways to do 2 things in the upcoming week. Improve current relationships and build new ones. The cumulative effect of doing this regularly is astonishing. Now, it doesn't take much time, but it does take consistency. Relationship building is one of those things that's not urgent like tasks with deadlines. So it's easily pushed off your to-do list for a few days. But then a few days becomes a few weeks, and a few months, and more. So do that quick weekly review. Keep your current connections healthy and build new ones before you need them. Do all 5 steps regularly, and you'll steadily strengthen and grow your circle of great connections. Relationships lead to the best things in life. Relationships are the best things in life. So here's wishing you, in Coach Ditka's words, many more strange and wonderful relationships, especially the wonderful ones. In my seminars about building trust in organizations, we brainstorm lists of what people do to reduce our trust and actions that increase trust. Whichever we do first, the reduce trust list is usually much longer. Joking, I ask, how many of us try to be untrustworthy? Raise your hands. No one does. I say, what a relief. All the people who need to build trust are somewhere else. And we laugh. We've all been stung by people being untrustworthy to us. Less apparent, but just as important, is earning the trust of others. Good intentions aren't enough to gain trust. We all need to work on it. Everything's harder without trust. Our intent gets distorted by others' concerns about our real motives or hidden agendas. Worse, they probably won't tell you they're skeptical. They'll smile or nod in apparent agreement. If they trusted you more, they might be more open, But that's the challenge, isn't it? Even with good intentions, we can get stuck in this lack of trust loop. So, how can you break out and build trust across a wide range of people? 4 steps. Study up, show up, open up, and follow up. First, study up. Know your stuff. Lack of credibility drains trust. So, in your area of knowledge, skill, or experience, stay current and step up in ways appropriate to your role in your meetings and conversations. Stay on your toes. Be prepared to put yourself into play. Respond promptly to questions or challenges that are relevant to your role. Be prepared also about your key stakeholders. Learn their expectations and their ways of getting things done. Learn how they run meetings, make decisions, deal with pressure, delegate, and communicate. Learn who they are as specific individuals because that's how they need to feel treated to give more trust. That leads right into our second step. Show up. Be 100% present for the person or people with whom you're meeting. Another major trust reducer is coming across like we're multitasking. We're not getting away with it. They notice, but it's addicting. One leader I coached couldn't help himself, so he took meetings in a room outside his office, no computer, and leaving his phone behind until he broke the habit. These days, we're all tempted to divide our attention, so it stands out when someone fully tunes in to what we say and mean. Be that person. Lean in, make eye contact, ask questions, be interested, be expressive, show empathy. Get them, their situation, and how you can help. Then, you're ready for the third step. Open up. Lao Tzu said, "He who does not trust enough will not be trusted." If we're perceived as defensive, closed, or self-focused, it signals others to be defensive and closed in return. Share a bit of yourself and give some trust in order to invite trust in return. People who are too guarded put us on guard. Lead by example and demonstrate the trust you want others to have in you. Don't over-control people. Give them room to take initiative. Now there is some risk here, so be thoughtful, but also keep in mind what Abraham Lincoln said. It's better to trust and be disappointed once in a while than to distrust and be miserable all the time. We don't want to be miserable. So let's open up. And after that, follow up. That's our fourth step. To build trust, we need to honor our commitments and obligations and live up to the standards we say we expect. Failing to follow up is probably the most common trust depleter. Being seen as having double standards is double trouble for trust. Remember, they get all the trust votes. Saying "trust me" gets you nowhere. They decide what our impact is on them. So be proactive about trust. Ask check-in questions, invite feedback, find out how things are going, and what can be better. Legendary college basketball coach Jim Valvano told this story. "I asked a referee if he could give me a foul for thinking bad things about him. He said, 'Of course not.' I said, 'Well, I think you stink.' And he gave me a foul. You can't trust refs." He's joking, but it's a fun reminder that people don't have to say what they think, and probably won't if they don't fully trust us yet. It's that lack of trust loop. Trust must be earned, and it's easy to lose. But you can build it better with more people and keep those trust referees on your side if you study up, open up, show up. Winter Olympics, the TV coverage showed downhill skier Lindsey Vonn just before her final run. She was shivering and shaking. A nervous breakdown? Just the opposite. The commentator explained she's mentally rehearsing. She's visualizing every lean and turn on the course. It was part of Vonn's pre-event routine, helping her manage the stress of the moment while channeling her focus for peak performance. A few minutes later, she posted the best time in the event and won the gold medal. Athletes like Vonn and others who perform under pressure like actors and singers commonly use pre-game rituals. So can we. It's the first of 2 great techniques we can adapt for our purposes to channel anxiety into excellence. Number 1, use a pre-game ritual. There's a reason world-class performers do this. It works. It's a brief routine you create to put yourself into a strong, confident, positive state, mentally, emotionally, and physically. There's research that shows a couple minutes can make a dramatic difference. Direct your thoughts toward the kind of thinking you associate with excellent performance. Focus on your positive purpose for being in that meeting, or remind yourself of times you've come through challenges before and succeeded. It's similar with your emotions. nudge yourself toward feelings you associate with excellent performance. Let's say you're feeling anxious. Don't resist it. That tends to make it worse. Instead, find a slightly more functional feeling that's in a nearby emotional neighborhood. Nudge that nervous feeling toward feeling determined. Instead of being stuck in a "I'm really nervous" cycle, take that nervous energy and point it toward "I'm really determined to channel all this energy for a great cause." As for your physical state, use behaviors associated with success. Adopt a posture that presents you at your confident best. Research shows it lowers stress and raises confidence. Also, take a few breaths, deep and slow. Fill your whole diaphragm, then exhale evenly and thoroughly while you focus on your preferred thoughts and feelings. Some people also like to use phrases that help them get centered or motivated. "I'm happy to be here," or "I'm here for a great cause." Lindsey Vonn was probably combining all three: intentional thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, visualizing a successful performance, simulating the emotions she wanted to experience, and using physical movements to prepave her actions. You can combine all three too. Experiment and have fun putting your pregame ritual together. But sometimes unexpected things happen during the game, so to speak. You might get caught off guard in a meeting, or anxiety might sneak up on you in a presentation. That's where our second technique comes in. Number 2, don't fight it, frame it. When anxiety, fear, panic, and insecurity show up, repressing them can empower them. It's a very clever part of ourselves that gets in our own way, with tricks and techniques to elude the blunt force of our willpower. We can't squash it, but if we frame it instead of fight it, we can outsmart it. Here's how. First, accept anxiety as a normal, natural human response. It's there, fine. Then, put it in its proper place and proportion. Because anxiety comes on so strong, it feels like the whole of your experience. But that's just an illusion. It's only part of the picture. In fact, let's go with that. Think of your current state as a huge picture or a canvas to paint on with a frame around it. Take the part that's anxious, acknowledge it, and then shrink it down into the lower corner. Make it a little portion of a much larger, grander, positive masterpiece. You're reframing the picture, and the frame is your positive purpose. To fill in all that positive space, you can use visualization techniques, picturing mentors and role models giving you great advice, or envisioning success states. What will it look like to do great in that upcoming meeting? You can talk your way through it too. There's some anxiety down here, lower part of the picture. It's there for a reason, to help energize me to create this, rest of the picture. Or, I'm feeling some nerves, lower part of the picture, because, and then go to your purpose. I'm feeling some nerves because I really want to do well. You might hear that inner voice saying, "You're not ready," or "You can't do this," or "You're going to fail." Now, just because it's loud doesn't mean it's true, nor is it the only voice. It's just drowning out the others. So acknowledge it, put it in the corner, turn the volume down on that voice, and turn up the volume on other, better advisors. What would your mentors or role models say to you in this situation? Call them to mind as virtual advisors. You'll be able to think of some things that they're likely to say, and they'll have much better advice than that jerky inner naysayer. In fact, the next time you want to channel anxiety into projecting more confidence, as one of those virtual advisors, be sure to recruit someone like Lindsey Vonn. She'll surely remind you to use a pregame ritual and put your anxiety to work to serve your purpose. If you frame it instead of fight it, it's all downhill from there. Moshe Rubinstein was named one of the top 20 professors of the 20th century at UCLA, and he's one of the most beloved educators in the world for students, managers, and executives in organizations. Looking back, he says the turning point that made him a great teacher came on the day he made a terribly embarrassing mistake. What happened gives all of us guidance for how to recover when we say or do the wrong thing. Moshe was writing a complicated engineering problem on the board in class, but the solution was wrong. He couldn't figure it out. He stood there, the expert, floundering in front of his audience. Then something happened. The students took over. They started trying to figure it out, and they liked it. Moshe realized his personal failure changed when viewed through what was best for his audience. He let go of his ego and embraced their interests. He depersonalized the mistake and focused on what was better for them instead of what was bad for him. Ever since then, his classes are adventures, and generations around the world count him as an inspiring communicator. Moshe learned that the mistake we make with mistakes is focusing on ourselves instead of others. We make it about us when what really matters is the impact on them. It's hard to avoid because our thinking turns against us. Oh my gosh, what have I done? And at the same time, our feelings nosedive. We get frustrated, embarrassed, or humiliated. It's a double whammy of worse. We make others uncomfortable because we're uncomfortable. So, the first thing to do after a mistake when that wave of oh my gosh hits you is to remember this principle. Just because it feels bad doesn't mean it is bad. That's what Moshe learned from his students, and it transformed him. The students taught the teacher that he's not supposed to act like some flawless machine. He's supposed to serve them as best he can, imperfections and all. That's why Moshe's example isn't just about teachers and teaching, it's about all of us. It's the universal difference between indulging our imperfections versus serving our listeners. So what should we do? There's a clue in the word itself, mistake. Divide it into miss and take. It's a mistake. Just like when they're filming movies, if they mistake a scene, they do a retake. Not only that, but a lot of times the mistakes are put into a fun blooper reel at the end of the film. The things that went wrong get repurposed with a positive spin. That's the way to recover from mistakes. So, immediately after we say or do the wrong thing, there's a fork in the road, self-indulgence or service to others. Take it personally or use it purposefully. Dwell on the mistake or do a retake. Do the retake. What happened, happened. You can't change that, but you can change what comes next. If you make a mistake, usually the best thing to do is smile and laugh at yourself. Okay, you're not perfect. You're human. Be human. Everyone makes mistakes, and everyone knows that everyone makes mistakes. Don't be too apologetic. Your listeners don't want to cringe or feel bad for you. They want you to get back on track too. If you can, incorporate the mistake into the flow of your message. Smile and say something like, that actually illustrates what not to focus on. Let me come back to what we should focus on. And then move forward. You don't want to make mistakes, but when they happen, remember there's also a hidden upside. You can demonstrate adaptability, and that's an impressive trait. It's like in job interviews when they add pressure by asking questions that are impossible to answer. Poised and adaptable you are. Acknowledge the mistake briefly, blend it into your flow with positive tone. Well, that's one way not to do it. Then turn right back toward your purpose. Let's clarify how to do it. In some situations, the tone is more serious. Fine. Simply say, let me correct that, and drive on. That's what they want to. Get out of your own way and get back to your purpose. Mistakes happen, and when they do, remember that even though it seems like it's about you, it's really not. It's about their experience more than yours, and you can improve their experience. Even if it feels bad at first, you can turn a distressing moment into an impressive aftermath. We can all learn from Moshe's students, just like he did, because when he messed up, they taught him to focus on their gain instead of his pain. So when you make a mistake, do a retake. Don't dwell on it, don't beat yourself up inside, don't say or do things that make your listeners uncomfortable. Acknowledge the error, let it go, and move forward. Take it from one of the best teachers in the world, and the students he credits with his most important lesson. Focus on keeping them on track, and you'll be on track. Imagine you're speaking in a meeting. Someone interrupts and stumps you, shocks you, or surprises you in a negative way. It could be a tough question you're unprepared for. Or maybe it's an aggressive accusation and your mind goes blank. We've all been there. When you're caught off guard, you can lose credibility in a flash by freezing up, fidgeting, fumbling for word. Feedback is an unfortunate word for a great thing to do. It should be like offering a person something good to drink. It should be value-adding, relationship-enhancing, and you should feel good about giving it. Feedback should always be helpful, and it doesn't always have to be critical. Give plenty of positive feedback, not just corrective feedback. You don't want a reputation as someone who only shows up when something's wrong. This comes up in my coaching, the person who's quick to point out problems but has little to say when things are going well. One leader I coached even started noticing when he approached people, they often winced and asked preemptively, "What is it now?" And no shortcuts. Don't stack a few good things just to get to the bad. Saying to someone, "Nice shoes, clean shirt, close shave." Okay, let me tell you how you screwed up. That's not what to do. Consistently look for genuine opportunities to accentuate the positive in real time. That's what to do. Build a reputation for appreciation. We're drawn to people who see us at our best. Catch people making progress. Notice when they do well, and let them know it. But even when giving corrective feedback, Your mission is always to help. It's always to add value. If it's corrective feedback, give it in private. Pick a suitable time and place for the conversation. Set a helpful tone. Make it explicit. Say, there's something I want to share with you, and I think you'll find it valuable. When you give feedback, and this applies both to positive and corrective feedback, follow these 4 steps. Step 1. State a specific behavior instead of an opinion, judgment, or feeling you have. Example, don't say, you're not a good listener. Rather say, in this morning's meeting before Marie finished her second point, you said, I've got a different idea, and you continued talking. That way, it's not an opinion or a generalization. It's specific. It's factual. Next, step 2, clarify the impact of the behavior on you or others. Don't say, people think you're really rude. Rather, say, I didn't get to hear Marie's point, and the rest of the team missed it too. After that, step 3, listen. Hear the person out. Dialogue with them to understand their reaction and acknowledge their intent, which was probably different from the impact. Be open, be interested, listen, connect. Your counterpart might need time to absorb and integrate your message, intellectually and emotionally. Partner with them in the discussion. You're not focusing on what they did wrong, you're trying to help them achieve the positive impact they want, and you want to. Then, step 4, ask them if they're open to suggestions if you have them, or offer to brainstorm alternatives with them. Help them like a partner, not a critic. Remember, even if you're a little nervous about delivering the feedback, you're not there just to deliver information. You're there to add value. You want to have a positive impact. You want the person and your relationship coming out better because of this conversation. You want them to appreciate you took the time, made the effort, and treated them with dignity and respect. So when you're delivering tough news, put thought and effort into what it's like for them to receive it, and make it clear in your words and body language that your intention is to help. Let's put it into action. Next time you give feedback, follow the 4 steps. Even if it's critical feedback, give it in a way that they'll welcome your insights again next time. Give it in a way they can feel good about receiving. Don't give feedback like awful medicine. Give it like a good drink. Who's someone in your life who knows you at your best, has your best interests in mind, and wants you to have the best impact you can in work and life? Think of this person for a moment, and it can be more than one person too. How would they encourage you going forward as you apply some tools we covered in this course in ways that will be most helpful to you? I ask you to call them to mind because these are the best people in our lives to remind us that communicating effectively isn't just exchanging information, but connecting inspiration. Communicating well is the way to get things done with people, to reach great results, build great relationships, have great experiences, to string together days, weeks, months, and years you can be proud of, to have the positive impact in work and life that you really want to have. Think of it this way. Imagine it's a year from today, and between now and then things go as well as you want. What will you have done, achieved, accomplished, and experienced that would lead you to say 12 months from now, this has been an exceptional year? What are your answers? What does success look like for you a year from today? Fill in the details, and then answer this. If you're really going to make it happen, what's the number one thing you can start doing now in your communication skills that will help you get there? Something to be even more effective in how you present yourself, your ideas, or how you connect with others. Pick one thing. You don't have to make it big, but you do need to do it consistently. Pick it, do it, start today. Don't let today become tomorrow, next week, next month. And don't do it alone. Find a friend or a colleague who's willing to help. Someone you can support on their development as they help you with yours. You don't have to work on the same things, just share the same commitment to exchange advice, encouragement, and feedback. Having an accountability partner is a best practice that accelerates positive change. Meeting regularly to support each other's growth is a terrific habit. Make it a habit. I hope the next year goes every bit as well as you just envisioned. To make that happen, check your progress and stay on track. Take out your calendar and mark the date 3 months from now to come back and watch the course again. See where you've improved, see how the tools apply to anything that's changed in your situation, and see what else you can add to your skills. One last thing. Remember how we started the segment? You were thinking about someone who knows you at your best, has your best interests in mind, and wants you to have the best impact you can in work and life? Reach out to that person and let them know that when you looked for some inspiration to communicate even more effectively, you thought of them. It's a great way to get started, and as Twain reminded us when we began the course, that's the secret to getting ahead. Best wishes to you getting ahead and having the impact you want and deserve.